Hollywood's golden age. Glitz, glamour, and a darkness nobody wanted to admit. You've heard about the parties, the secrets, the endless rumors, but what about the shocking reality behind those closed studio doors? What really happened to the brightest stars when the lights went off? Did they have any say in the roles they played, on and off the screen? Get ready, because we're diving headfirst into the 30 Golden Age actresses who were forced into situations nobody would envy. Judy Garland? Judy Garland was America's darling, but behind the camera, her world was anything but enchanting. Hollywood studio bosses controlled every inch of Judy's life, from the shoes she wore to the words she said. But the darkest secret was the price of that control. Executives at MGM expected Garland to keep important men happy, making it clear her career depended on her compliance. Refusing wasn't an option. As a teen, she was pushed into a world where grown men made all the rules, and she was left with no voice. Judy's mother was even rumored to have encouraged her to please the right people to stay in the spotlight. The constant pressure and manipulation took a lifelong toll, leaving Judy battling trust issues, self-doubt, and exhaustion. The magic on screen, it was built on years of private pain. Judy Garland's story isn't just about dreams come true, it's a harsh lesson about what young women lost in a system designed to use and discard them. The yellow brick road glittered for fans, but for Judy, it was lined with traps and heartbreak, and she never truly escaped the shadows of Hollywood's golden but cruel machine. Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe, the icon, the fantasy, the tragic legend. But for Monroe, fame was a double-edged sword. From the start, powerful studio figures made it clear her future depended on more than just talent. Marilyn later spoke openly about being passed around by those who promised her stardom. In reality, her choices were limited by a system where saying no could mean career death. Rumors swirled that she was pushed into relationships and private meetings she never wanted, simply to please the men pulling the strings. It wasn't all glamour, it was survival, and everyone around her seemed to know the rules, except her. The girl who became the world's most desired woman was often treated more like a reward than a real person. Monroe's longing for love and acceptance was fueled by years of being valued for what others could take. She was forced to smile for the cameras while hiding the reality offset. That in Golden Age Hollywood, even legends had to play along with a game stacked against them. Monroe's story is a stark reminder that fame rarely comes free, and sometimes it's a lifelong cost. Jean Harlow. Jean Harlow, the dazzling platinum blonde, seemed to have everything: a magnetic screen presence, adoring fans, and Hollywood at her feet. But behind the glitz, her life was shaped by decisions she never got to make. Pushed by her own mother and stepfather, Harlow was introduced to powerful studio bosses who controlled her future with a handshake and a hidden agenda. She was used as a bargaining chip, sent to charm executives at private parties in exchange for contracts and publicity. Harlow's journey to fame came with silent demands: play the part off screen as well as on. She couldn't afford to disappoint anyone or risk her family's ambitions collapsing. The pressure to comply was overwhelming, and rumors about her personal life followed her everywhere. Harlow played the carefree bombshell in public, but privately, she battled a world that treated her like property, not a person. The cost of stardom was isolation, manipulation, and a stolen sense of agency. Jean Harlow's smile became a mask, hiding the heartbreak of a Hollywood system that expected everything and offered real freedom to no one. She was a superstar, but at what price? Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford was the queen of reinvention, but her biggest battles were always off-screen. Early in her career, MGM hosted legendary parties where starlets like Joan were expected to play hostess, whether they wanted to or not. Studio bosses made it clear: cooperate or kiss your dreams goodbye. Joan later hinted at how young actresses were lined up and paired with powerful men, pressured to be more than just charming guests. It wasn't glamour, it was a system built on control and fear, with silence as the main currency. Crawford's rise to stardom came at the cost of her privacy, dignity, and choices. shaping her into the fierce, guarded icon we know today. The pain of those years followed her through life, casting shadows over every success. Her daughter's book painted her as cold, but many believe it was self-defense, armor forged in a world where saying no wasn't allowed. Joan's legacy isn't just her Oscar or her legendary roles. It's the story of a woman who survived a ruthless industry by any means necessary. For Crawford, Hollywood was both a stage and a cage, and the applause could never quite drown out what she endured to stay on top. Loretta Young. Loretta Young embodied old-school elegance on screen, but her real-life story was anything but graceful. She entered Hollywood as a teenager, quickly learning the unwritten rules: please the right people or disappear. The most infamous chapter? Her so-called romance with Clark Gable. MGM and their fixers didn't just encourage the match, they orchestrated every move, covering up Young's pregnancy by hiding her away until the scandal cooled off. Loretta was forced to lie, pretend, and return as if nothing happened. Her own feelings and choices never factored into the studio's carefully plotted narrative. The ordeal left a scar she carried forever, and years later, she spoke candidly about the fear and manipulation she endured. Hollywood built her career on charm and grace, but Loretta's survival depended on learning how to bend without breaking. The real story behind her perfect image? It's about a young woman forced to play by rules she never agreed to. The industry saw her as a piece in their game, not a person with dreams and dignity. Loretta Young's life proves that sometimes the most beautiful smiles are hiding the deepest battles. Frances Farmer. Frances Farmer had a mind of her own, and in Golden Age Hollywood, that was practically a crime. Studios and fixers targeted her from the start, making it clear that stepping out of line meant paying a price. Frances was pushed into events, meetings, and dates arranged by others. Her compliance wasn't just expected, it was demanded. When she started to rebel, refusing to play along, Hollywood quickly labeled her as difficult. Suddenly, roles disappeared, and her reputation took a nosedive. Even worse, when Frances wouldn't back down, she was forcibly isolated and later institutionalized, her voice silenced by those who felt threatened by her independence. The stories from inside those institutions are chilling. Frances was left powerless, her past used against her. All she wanted was control over her own career, but the price for resistance was steep. Farmer's story became a warning: fight the system, and it fights back harder. Behind the headlines and the wild tales was a woman who simply wanted to act on her own terms, but was trapped by an industry that punished anyone who tried to write their own script. Clara Bow. Clara Bow was the original It Girl, Hollywood's wild child whose image lit up every screen. But fame came at a steep price. From the beginning, studio bosses and managers exploited her youthful energy, pushing her into situations far from the movie sets. Clara was pressured to attend private gatherings and entertain guests, her real desires never considered. Her agent saw her more as a business venture than a person, making decisions that benefited everyone but Clara herself. The rumor mill churned with stories, some true, most exaggerated, but all feeding the idea that Clara was out of control. In reality, she was trapped by a system designed to keep her powerless. Scandal was a marketing tool, and if she resisted, the offers vanished and the gossip intensified. Her career ended early, not because she lost her magic, but because she was worn down by years of exploitation. Clara Bow's story is a sharp reminder that sometimes the wildest reputations are built on a foundation of manipulation and lost choices. Shirley Temple. Shirley Temple's curls and dimples made her America's darling, but behind the scenes, her world was run by adults with their own agenda. Signed to a studio contract as a toddler, Shirley's entire life was scheduled and controlled. The so-called charm school for young stars was anything but charming. Studio executives saw her as a gold mine, not a child, and paraded her in front of powerful guests with unspoken expectations. In her memoir, Temple recounted an MGM producer's inappropriate behavior when she was just 12, a horrifying glimpse behind the industry's family-friendly mask. Refusing to play along meant risking her family's future, so her mother kept her moving forward, one film after another. The innocence projected on screen was a far cry from the adult world Shirley was forced to navigate daily. Leaving Hollywood as a teenager wasn't just a career choice, it was a necessary escape. Temple's story proves that sometimes childhood dreams are shaped by nightmares no one wants to admit. Veronica Lake. Veronica Lake had the looks, the voice, and that iconic peekaboo hairstyle, making her a household name almost overnight. But as fast as the fame arrived, so did the hidden costs. Lake found herself pressured by handlers and studio bosses to entertain the industry's VIPs, with the unspoken threat that resistance meant being replaced. Even as she graced magazine covers and film posters, Veronica's life off-screen was a string of unwanted obligations and sacrifices. She later talked about being passed around behind the scenes, losing more and more control over her destiny with every contract. The glamour, the luxury, the stardom, they all had a price, and Lake paid in isolation and heartache. As her personal life unraveled and offers dried up, it became clear that Hollywood's promises were only good as long as she played along. Veronica Lake's name still echoes in film history, but her legacy also tells a cautionary tale about a business that rewards compliance, punishes defiance, and forgets its stars the minute the cameras stop rolling. Peg Entwistle. Peg Entwistle is a haunting name for anyone who's ever chased a dream in Los Angeles. She's remembered as the Hollywood sign girl, but her real story is one of silent battles and heartbreak. Peg arrived in Hollywood full of hope, only to discover the industry's dark reality. Letters from her friends reveal how she was pushed to meet the expectations of studio heads, introductions, and favors for men with the power to grant or deny roles. Refusing to play the game led to doors closing one by one. Peg's career stalled, not for lack of talent, but for lack of compliance. She became more isolated, cut off from opportunities, and quickly faded from the spotlight she fought so hard to find. The dream factory she idolized showed no mercy to those unwilling to bend. Peg's story is a somber warning. In Hollywood's golden age, hope and innocence were often the first things to go, replaced by a ruthless system that demanded everything in exchange for a fleeting chance at fame. Peggy Shannon. Peggy Shannon was poised to be Hollywood's next it girl, the studio's answer to fading stars of the past. She had the looks, the drive, and a wild sparkle that made casting directors take notice. But soon the reality hit. Powerful men controlled every chance she got, and they expected more than talent in return. Studio fixers lined up meetings, and if Peggy hesitated, threats and rumors followed. The rules were simple: go along or watch your reputation crumble. The support system she thought she had vanished at the first sign of resistance. As her fame faded, Shannon was left to survive any way she could, with those who once promised her the world turning away. The Hollywood dream became a nightmare of whispers, lost roles, and desperation. Peggy's downfall was always painted as self-inflicted, but the truth was, the industry was eager to use her up and throw her away. Her story is proof that not every fall from grace is deserved. Sometimes, it's engineered. Barbara Payton. Barbara Payton's story is pure Hollywood heartbreak, a rapid ascent to stardom, followed by a merciless crash. Early in her career, she was promised the world by agents and producers, but those promises always came with a catch. Private meetings, introductions, favors for the influential. These weren't invitations, they were orders. When Barbara began to resist, the system closed in. Film offers dried up, her name was dragged through the tabloids, and survival became a day-to-day challenge. People painted her as reckless, but most never saw the hidden pressure she endured just to keep working. She was forced into situations she never wanted just to make ends meet. Every step forward brought new demands and more isolation. In the end, Barbara was left fighting for dignity in a town that once cheered her name but quickly looked away. Her legacy is a brutal reminder that Hollywood doesn't just build stars, it destroys them when the spotlight fades. Patricia Douglas. Patricia Douglas is the Hollywood whistleblower history nearly erased. In 1937, what was supposed to be a harmless industry party turned into a nightmare. When Patricia bravely spoke out, accusing powerful studio insiders of assault, the machine sprang into action, not to help her, but to crush her. Studio fixers launched a campaign of threats, bribes, and smear tactics to silence her. They blacklisted her, spread lies, and made sure she'd never work again. Patricia's name disappeared from the headlines, but her story was whispered on backlots for decades. She refused to be just another silent victim, but Hollywood made her pay dearly for her courage. Only decades later did the world learn how far the studios went to keep their secrets. Patricia Douglas's case was more than a scandal. It was a chilling example of what happened to any woman who dared to speak up. Her fight paved the way for future generations, even if she never got the justice she deserved. Laya Leeds. Laya Leeds is mostly remembered for a headline-grabbing scandal, but the truth runs deeper than any tabloid story. After her arrest in a notorious drug bust, the glitz quickly turned into desperation. Studio insiders and so-called friends who once praised her talent vanished, replaced by handlers who saw her as easy prey. With her career in ruins, Lila was pushed toward opportunities that meant keeping the right men happy, not the audience. Agents who once promised stardom now arranged meetings that left her with no real choices. Every attempt to break free from the cycle was met with slammed doors and relentless gossip. Lila's downfall became entertainment for others, but nobody wanted to talk about the system that left her stranded. Her life was a classic case of Hollywood's dark side, rewarding compliance, punishing independence, and never letting anyone forget the price of fame. Virginia Rappe. Virginia Rappe's name is forever attached to one of Hollywood's earliest and ugliest scandals. But before the tabloids tore her apart, Virginia's life was shaped by the hidden rules of show business. Her handlers and friends often pushed her into the company of influential men, trading her presence for favors, connections, and security. Virginia wanted to succeed on her own terms, but the industry had other plans. Whenever she resisted, the consequences were swift: lost roles, cruel gossip, and isolation from her peers. By the time tragedy struck, she'd already been trapped by years of exploitation and manipulation. Virginia's fate became a media circus, but the real story was a system that valued profit over people, leaving countless women like her with nowhere to turn. Her legacy is a warning. Behind every Hollywood headline is a deeper, darker truth that deserves to be told. Darnell. Linda Darnell's face was on every marquee, but few knew the struggle happening behind the velvet curtains. Darnell was signed to Fox as a teenager, and from day one, she was told she'd be protected as long as she played by the rules. Those rules? Keep the important men happy. Rumors flew around the studio lot about executives sharing Linda with clients and industry insiders, treating her more like a party favor than a rising actress. Darnell was quick-witted and ambitious, but in a world ruled by powerful men, ambition was no shield. She worked constantly, doing whatever it took to maintain her place in the spotlight. But even as she climbed the ladder, the price never changed. The emotional toll, the sense of being owned, never really left her. Linda's stunning career is proof that sometimes the brightest lights cast the darkest shadows, and old Hollywood had plenty of both. Susan Peters. Susan Peters was Hollywood's golden girl, talented, radiant, and beloved by fans. But when a tragic accident left her paralyzed, everything changed. The same industry that once celebrated her beauty and charm suddenly saw her as an inconvenience. To keep up appearances, agents and managers pressured Susan to entertain important men behind closed doors. Money was tight and roles disappeared, so the options were cruel: play along or fade away. Susan's letters from the time show a woman heartbroken and desperate for real respect, not handouts wrapped in threats. She went from being an A-list leading lady to a forgotten name, left to navigate a world that cared more about headlines than humanity. Hollywood offered her no safety net, just more demands, fewer choices, and the crushing realization that her value was tied to what she could do for others. Susan's legacy deserves better than the treatment she endured. Lupe V. Lupe Velez, the fiery Mexican Spitfire, lit up every room she walked into, but behind her wild public persona was a life managed by others. Velez was handled by agents and studio publicists who mapped out her romances as carefully as her movie roles. Many of her so-called relationships were arranged to benefit someone else's business or reputation. Behind closed doors, handlers profited from sending Lupe to events and dates with wealthy producers and visiting VIPs, making it clear her career depended on being accommodating. Even as she became one of the biggest Latin stars in Hollywood, Velez was often left feeling powerless, with every part of her image and her life under someone else's control. She brought laughter and fire to the screen, but the price was a private world of obligations and pressure, a reality masked by the glitz and humor that made her famous. Dorothy Dandridge. Dorothy Dandridge was the first Black woman to be nominated for a Best Actress Oscar, but her journey was a masterclass in double standards and cruel exploitation. Dandridge's managers and agents knew the odds were against her, and they often pressured her to attend exclusive gatherings where her company was considered part of the deal. She faced advances from men in power who held her future in their hands, and saying no meant risking it all, especially for a woman of color. Dandridge later described the humiliation and fear she lived with, her dreams manipulated by people who saw her as an asset, not a person. For Dorothy, every career step was a negotiation, and every opportunity came with unspoken strings attached. Her grace on camera was legendary, but it was matched by the quiet resilience she needed just to survive in a town that rarely played fair. Billie Holiday. Billie Holiday's story is usually told through the music, raw, haunting, unforgettable. But before she was Lady Day, before her voice changed American music forever, Billie was forced into hardship most can't even imagine. Early on, she was taken advantage of by managers who saw her talent as a goldmine and her vulnerability as an opportunity. Those who claimed to protect her instead funneled her into situations where she had no say, arranging meetings and appearances that were anything but voluntary. For Billie, every step forward in her career was a battle against exploitation and betrayal. Her struggle wasn't just for success, it was for dignity and freedom in a world stacked against her. When she finally gained some independence, she used her voice to fight back, turning pain into power. But the scars from those early years ran deep, and the industry never truly let her escape them. Evelyn Nesbit. Evelyn Nesbit is the original face of American Scandal, but her story isn't just about headlines, it's about survival in a world that never gave her a chance. Before Hollywood even had its own sign, Evelyn's beauty made her a sensation in New York and Los Angeles. But behind the glamorous photo shoots and lavish parties, Nesbit was controlled by those who claimed to care for her. Her own mother introduced her to powerful men, making deals that had nothing to do with movies and everything to do with money and access. The infamous Stanford White affair? That was just the tip of the iceberg. Evelyn's life became a revolving door of people exploiting her for their own gain, leaving her with trauma that followed her for decades. The public saw a star. The insiders saw a commodity. Evelyn Nesbit's tale is a warning about what really lurked behind the era's velvet ropes. Rita Hayworth. Rita Hayworth, the legendary redhead whose image was plastered on every magazine, lived a life shaped as much by manipulation as by movies. Born Margarita Cancino, she was groomed for fame from childhood, but the road to stardom came with ugly, unspoken rules. Her first husband, also her manager, used her as a bargaining chip, arranging introductions and meetings that were more about business than love. When Rita signed with Columbia, she faced relentless pressure from executives to please powerful men and keep the studio's most important clients entertained, on and off the lot. She played the goddess on screen, but in private, she was all too human, worn down by demands and threats. Rita later revealed just how many choices weren't really hers at all. Beneath the perfect Hollywood smile was someone who knew what it felt like to be treated as a prize, not a person. Gene Tierney. Gene Tierney, one of the most breathtaking faces of classic cinema, seemed untouchable to fans. But inside the Hollywood machine, her beauty made her a target. Studio-arranged dates were just another part of the contract. Tierney was regularly pressured to accompany wealthy men, with refusal met by veiled threats and career roadblocks. The pressure didn't end on the movie set. Every party, every event was a reminder that her place in the industry wasn't just about acting. When Jean tried to resist, she quickly learned the price. Directors stopped calling, scripts dried up, and she was labeled difficult. Behind the elegance and grace was a woman battling for control of her own story. Tierney's biggest fight wasn't just for stardom, but for the right to decide her own fate, a struggle that countless actresses of her era knew all too well. Olivia De Havilland. Olivia De Havilland was Hollywood's golden girl, best known for her fierce intelligence and steely resolve, traits that eventually saw her take Warner Brothers to court and win. But before that historic victory, Olivia was just another contract player, subject to the unwritten rules of the studio system. Multiple insiders have said she faced clear threats, go along with company obligations, or risk everything she'd worked for. The whispered promise was always the same: say yes, or you're finished. Olivia's refusal to play by those rules meant years of grueling battles and lost roles, but she never lost her nerve. Her fight wasn't just for herself, it paved the way for a new generation of actors. Still, the personal cost was enormous. Hollywood liked to market Olivia as a fairy tale heroine, but off-screen, she was a warrior, navigating a system designed to break anyone who didn't fall in line. Gloria Grahame. Gloria Grahame's sultry roles in noir classics weren't just a Hollywood creation. They were born from real-life battles against a system that never respected boundaries. Grahame's rise came with a side of relentless gossip, and much of it was manufactured by studio bosses who saw her as a useful distraction for clients and power players. Whisper campaigns labeled her easy, but those rumors were mostly cover for the way she was forced to navigate Hollywood's underbelly. Gloria's choices weren't really choices at all. When she resisted, she faced blackmail, threats, and sudden dry spells in her career. Still, she fought back with the only weapons she had: raw talent, sharp wit, and a stubborn refusal to be shamed. Gloria Grahame's story is a reminder that some reputations were carefully crafted, not by the actresses themselves, but by the system built to control them. Elizabeth Scott. Elizabeth Scott was the cool, mysterious femme fatale of the film noir era, so naturally Hollywood's rumor mill couldn't leave her alone. In the 1950s, her name was splashed all over the press as part of a notorious call girl scandal. But the headlines left out the real story. Elizabeth, like so many others, was targeted by a system that forced women into company for the studio's top clients and business partners. Even as she fought to protect her reputation, she faced relentless pressure from handlers who made it clear, help the right men or watch your career evaporate. Elizabeth denied the wildest rumors, but the stress and isolation were real. The scandal was a warning to every actress. In Hollywood, your image was never entirely your own, and there was always someone ready to cash in on your struggles. Elizabeth's life proves that sometimes surviving the studio system was the greatest role of all. Hedy Lamarr. Hedy Lamarr, the screen siren who doubled as a brilliant inventor, saw both sides of the spotlight's glare. Before Hollywood, in Europe, her much older producer husband pulled the strings, setting up encounters for his business circle that had nothing to do with her dreams. When Lamarr finally escaped to America, she hoped for a fresh start, but the pressure followed. In Hollywood, she was told her beauty could open any door, but sometimes that just meant being pushed through ones she'd rather have kept shut. Roles, contracts, and freedom were always conditional. Make the right people happy or risk being forgotten. Lamarr's genius and determination eventually broke her out of the old mold, but the industry's expectations lingered. Her legacy isn't just about beauty or brains, it's about endurance in a business built on control and compliance. And her story is still a lesson for anyone who thinks Hollywood was ever just about talent. Tallulah Bankhead. Tallulah Bankhead was larger than life, fierce, outspoken, and completely unafraid to stir up trouble. But even for someone as bold as Tallulah, the casting couch wasn't just a rumor, it was a reality. Despite her connections and raw talent, Bankhead found herself pressured and cornered by powerful men who expected more than a performance. Stories swirled about what she'd done to get ahead, but Tallulah always fought back with wit and bravado. When she refused advances, the consequences were immediate: lost roles, nasty gossip, and a constant threat to her career. Yet she refused to be broken, openly mocking the system and calling out hypocrisy when few others dared. Bankhead's attitude was a shield, but the attacks were relentless. Her story is proof that courage alone couldn't always beat the odds in a town where saying no was the ultimate rebellion. Marsha Hunt. Marsha Hunt was known as Hollywood's quiet activist, a gentle voice who stood up to injustice both on and off the screen. But even a reputation for integrity didn't shield her from the industry's worst traditions. When she started refusing favors for roles, Marsha became a target. The studios had subtle ways of punishing independence. Fewer auditions, whisper campaigns, and contracts that seemed to disappear overnight. Her blacklisting wasn't just about politics, it was about control. Marsha later spoke about the pressure to play along if you wanted to work, and the risks faced by any woman who dared to say no. Despite the odds, she stuck to her principles, even when it cost her everything she'd built. Marsha Hunt's story isn't as famous as some, but it's a blueprint for resisting a system that counted on silence. Marion Davies. Marion Davies played the party girl in the papers, but her real life was a chess game with the most powerful man in media, William Randolph Hearst. To the public, she was Hearst's glamorous companion, but behind closed doors, their relationship came with demands she never truly agreed to. Insiders whispered about how Davies was loaned out to business associates and VIPs as a condition of keeping her career and her security intact. The lavish lifestyle was real, but so were the sacrifices. Marion stayed loyal, but everyone knew loyalty in Hollywood always came with strings. Her story is a reminder that even at the top, there was always someone else pulling the levers. For Marion, freedom meant walking a razor's edge, never sure if her next step would be her last in the spotlight. Hollywood's golden age sold us dreams, but for these 30 women, the cost of fame was steeper than any tabloid ever dared admit. Behind every spotlight was a system determined to break them. So what do you think? How many more stories like these are still buried in studio vaults and whispered on old backlots? Drop your thoughts below, hit subscribe, and share this story with someone who still believes the old Hollywood myth. Stay curious, and don't let the real stories fade to black.